Okay, on the bench we have a JVC AX-R97. This is basically the upgrade to my JVC RX-R76. The upgrade to this is this does not include the built-in tuner, so this is just the integrated amplifier section. And this also has some better specifications and a bit more power output. So let's take a look at the specifications of this amplifier, and then I'll get into why you would want to go with an older amplifier like this. So this is from 1989, back when they built stuff a bit better than they do today. And this was made in Japan. Now my JVC RX-R76 is still a fantastic unit. It was made in 1990, but it was made in Malaysia. Still a pretty good sounding unit, but this is the upgrade to that unit, and this one was made in Japan, which is where, you know, JVC is originally from, Japan Victor Company. The specifications for this unit is, so this will do 125 watts per channel, RMS, both channels driven into 8 ohm load, 20 to 20 hertz bandwidth, with no more than 0.03% THD, total harmonic distortion. So this will do 125 watts into an 8 ohm load, whereas the RX-R76 does 110 watts into an 8 ohm load. The frequency response on this is 5 hertz to 80 kilohertz, and the THD is 0.004%, 125 watts. That's a 1 kilohertz test tone at 8 ohms. The SNR is 103 decibels. And then this also has a lot more inputs, and it also has a lot more frequencies in the equalizer. So why would you go with this amplifier rather than a modern day receiver? Well, there's a couple reasons. And sorry if I sound a little bit hoarse. It's because I have some bad sinuses, so a little bit of scratchy throat, a little bit of runny nose. You know how that is, starting to get towards fall. But this amplifier here is a pure analog amplifier. There's no crappy digital processing bullshit like Pro Logic or any of that other garbage that you see on modern receivers. You know, a lot of these modern receivers, one, they're built like shit, but two, they overcomplex the circuit, and they just have so much bullshit going on, so much digital processing, that the sound quality is very lackluster. In terms of the reliability of these modern receivers, they're not built very well, and they break down within a few years. And plus the soldering on them, the lead-free solder, you have a bunch of cold solder joints in them. It's a hassle. So why would you go with this receiver here? Now this is an integrated amplifier, so it's not actually a receiver. A receiver has the tuner built in, meaning the FM and AM tuner. So it's the integrated amplifier and the tuner. That's what a receiver is. An integrated amplifier is a power amplifier, but it has input selection, so it can take various inputs. It may have EQ built in, and it has a preamplifier for, say, a turntable, so for like a record player. Whereas a power amplifier is just a straight power amplifier. You don't have the input selections, you don't have the preamp or the EQ. Those all become dedicated units. So that's why this is called an integrated amplifier. A receiver is an integrated amplifier and an FM and AM tuner built in. So that's the distinction there. So, like I said, compared to the JVC RX-R76, which is a fantastic unit as well, this is the upgrade to it. And this was basically a year older and made in Japan. So there's the distinction there. So this unit here, compared to the, we'll put the RX-R76 here on the table here soon to compare it. But there is a design flaw with both of these units, and that is it's a design flaw with a lot of JVC's earlier receivers and integrated amps, is how they drive the power meters. There's a design flaw there, and we'll get into the fix for that here in a bit. So I'm going to put the RX-R76 on the tables just because I keep comparing it so you guys can see the difference here. So I don't know how well you can see both these units on the table. It's a bit of a tight fit because it's taking up basically all of my workbench here. But as you can see, the height of the AX-R97 is basically identical to the integrated amplifier section of the RX-R76. But you see, the RX-R76 has that additional AM and FM tuner built on, which makes it a receiver. And as you can see, we have a lot more EQ. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different frequencies to EQ with the SEA, whereas on the RX-R76 we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we get some additional ones added on here. So we get 2 additional frequencies there. We also see we get a lot more input selection. So on the RX-R76, one of those inputs is taken up by the tuner. So you're left with 1, 2, 3 regular line level inputs and 1 phono input. Whereas on the AX-R97, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line level inputs and then 1 phono input. So there's the distinction there. On the AX-R97, you also have 2, you can hook up 2 different speaker pairs. So you have speakers A and speakers B. You see this on some receivers, but I believe on the AX-R97 they're ran in series for when you run both these. So I don't really recommend running two separate speakers. I just recommend hooking up a single pair and just run it on channel 1. But because I do believe this is ran in series, so it has that functionality, but it's more just acts like a switch. They don't have additional transistors in here to drive a separate set of speakers. But the power meter scale is identical on both of these units. They're both scaled to 125, but this one actually is rated for 125. This one's rated for 110. And this one was sent into 12-volt vids to be repaired, and I might have to be sending it in again because both these units, they have a design flaw with the lights, but also another thing is, you can't see this yet, but on the top, these things are very open. They have basically the entire top is just vents, so it's really easy for stuff to get in there and short stuff out on the circuit board. So even if you're spraying, like maybe say you're spraying like Lysol in your bedroom or whatever, ask me how I know. The mist or whatever can end up getting in these units very easily and shorting something out. So yeah, I won't dive too much into that, but that is a something to be cautious of. Is on the top of these units, since the entire unit at the top is basically vents, if you're not stacking another thing on top of this, like a CD player or whatever, or a turntable, if you're just using this as just a amplifier only system and not like a rack system, just be cautious of that. So these units, I know the RX-R76 was part of a rack system back in 1990, a stylistic system. If I can figure out the exact model, I'll overlay that rack system. But this would sell as a complete system with the CD deck, the tape deck, the turntable at the top. So that was something. And what was strange about this one is it had like a carousel style CD deck. Now for the AX-R97, I believe this one was also part of a rack system back in 1989. I don't know the specific rack system or what components went with that, but there you go. I'm not too concerned about the components that went to the rack because, like I said, I just use these as an amplifier only, and I feed them with my topping D90 DAC. So anyway, I digress. There's the comparison on the front, and we'll flip these around and compare them on the back. So here is the back of these units, the comparison. And you'll notice there's a couple differences. One, the back on this one is just pure black on the AX-R97, whereas on the RX-R76, you have a gray back. But the major difference is here is, let's see here. So on this one, you have the inputs for the tuner, because like I said, this is a receiver, so it has the AM, FM tuner built in. What I don't like about the RX-R76's tuner is they don't use a coax input. They use this type, so you have to kind of like, if you have an antenna, you kind of have to strip the cables and put them in like that. I believe you can get adapters, but that is one thing I never liked about the tuner section on the RX-R76. You'll see that you have your inputs here for CD, tape 1, tape 2, / video sound, and you have 2 record outputs. And you'll notice you have just a single stereo pair of speaker outputs, and these basically use the same connector style that this one does. You have 3 plugs right here. Some of them are switched with the power on the front. I recommend never using these. There's no need to. That's just something that they did on these older units. On this one, you're going to notice something very quick. This has a lot more inputs, right? And that's why I told you. So both of these units, since they're given their age, the RCA inputs are before the color coding on RCA. So they're the same functionality as RCA inputs. It's just before they had the color coding. You know, the white for left channel, the red for the right channel. So you basically just have to read on them. They'll say like left and right, if that makes sense. But that's the difference between these units is the inputs. This one obviously has no tuner built in because it's just an integrated amp. But the main difference that I see right here is the made in Japan versus the made in Malaysia. Okay, that's the main difference that I see right there. And these both have the CompuLink 1 synchro. I can go into what that is later. That's just a proprietary JVC thing to where if you have a rack full of JVC equipment, say you press the CD button on the amplifier to change the source of CD. When you do that, it'll like automatically turn on the CD player and start playing or whatever. It's just a way to sync the rack up so everything like functions in uniform, if that makes sense. That's all the SynchroLock or the CompuLink really is. Okay, since we have compared both the AX-R97 and the JVC RX-R76, now we're going to go ahead and take an overview of this unit. So, the coloring of this is a bit different than the RX-R76. This is more of a deeper black, or the RX-R76 is more of like a darker gray, like a grayish black, if that makes sense. So you have a little bit of a color difference, which you probably saw on camera when you saw both the units compared. So you have this nice big tactile power button. And then you have 2 different inputs for speakers, and I believe these are ran in series, so you don't have additional transistors. So I don't really recommend using these speaker buttons. I recommend you just have a single speaker pair hooked up and just use channel 1. Then you have a headphone output. This is driven by the main transistors, so it's not like this has a headphone amplifier built into it. It's just using the main transistors, but what it's doing is it's putting like a big resistor in series with this phone's output, so you're not like blowing up your headphones or whatever. But you also gotta think how amplifiers work. Headphones typically have a much higher impedance than a loudspeaker. So like you hook up like a 32 ohm set of speakers or headphones into this amplifier, that's a lot more resistance against the amplifier, which hence a lot less output. Whereas loudspeakers are generally, 4 to 8 ohms or whatever, 16 ohms, whereas headphones are generally like 32 ohms, etc. Makes sense? So you also have more resistance against the amplifier, less power output. So you got to think about how speakers work. But they do have like a resistor or whatever in series with this phone's output, so you're not like blowing up your speaker, your headphones. you'll see it does say stereo integrated amplifier, and I explained what an integrated amplifier means versus a power amplifier. This is a power amplifier, but it has, the analog input switching, EQ, which EQ is optional. Not all integrated amplifiers are going to have the EQ stage, and preamp for the turntable, which was what makes an integrated amplifier. But you'll see right here you have a 7-band SEA graphic equalizer. So you have 63 hertz, 160 hertz, 400 hertz, 1 kilohertz, 25 kilohertz, 2.5 kilohertz. Sorry. 25 kilohertz would not make any sense. 6.3 kilohertz, and then 16 kilohertz. So those are your frequencies. So if you want to have more bass, you bring up to 63 hertz or whatever. And it's adjustable plus 10 decibel to minus 10 decibel. So you have a lot more EQ stage, if that makes sense. And the thing about this is you'll notice there's an SEA source button. And this SEA source button toggles this EQ stage on and off. So that is the difference compared to the RX-R76, is where you can't toggle on and off. By toggling off, you just, level out all the meters, if that makes sense. So it says high fidelity 2 amp block configuration. This has the GM driver for improved actual performance and direct power supply for better sound. Now, the RX-R76 does have both the GM driver and direct power supply, but doesn't have the high fidelity 2 amp block configuration. So I'm not sure what's different between that and the RX-R76, because they have a very similar amplifier stage. If we looked at the internals, they both have the same output transistors, and they're very, very similar internally and externally. They just have some differences. But the GM driver and direct power supply is also a feature on the RX-R76. So here we have our power meter, and this basically has LEDs on both scales that bounce up and down to the music depending on what your power output to your speakers is. So you'll see right here, you'll see 50. That means if it blinks onto that LED, that means on that channel it outputted 50 watts right then and there. And you see the scale goes up to 125 because this is 125 watt per channel amplifier. Now the RX-R76 also has the same scale, and it will reach 125, but you're going to have more distortion at 125 watt output than this one, because this one's meant to go to 125 and it has better distortion ratios. So there is that. Now there is a design flaw in this, whereas we'll get to it here in a second when we crack the hood on this. But these power LEDs, because that's all these are, is these are just LEDs on both sides here. They're powered via a power. They have an IC, integrated IC, a sharp IC, and these actually have identical power meter ICs. That is powered off the power of the backlight, because this has two 12-volt, 150 milliamp fuse bulbs that lights this whole display up here as the backlight. Now the backlight is not what lights up the power meters, because the power meters are individual LEDs, but that IC that runs these power meters is fed basically off of the backlight power. So if the bulbs burn out, the power meter IC will lose power and not light the LEDs, which is kind of a silly design. So what JVC did was they put two Zener diodes basically in parallel with this to, if the bulbs burn out for the backlight, those two fuse bulbs, and only one has to blow because the bulbs are ran in series. So if one bulb goes, they both go. They put two Zener diodes in series, which causes the power IC to still receive power. The problem is those Zener diodes were underrated, and they will overheat. So if the fuse bulbs go out on this, what happens is the Zener diodes start conducting, and since they're underrated, they start overheating and they scorch the board, and they might take out a couple of resistors in that circuit, in that area of the circuit. So it's a common design flaw that's on all these JVC amplifiers from the late 80s, early 90s era. So the fix is you cut those two Zener diodes out before they've scorched the board, basically. And what happens is when the bulbs burn out for the backlight, your power meter IC just loses power, but the amplifier still functions. You just go to Parts Express, buy 2 fuse bulbs, pop them in there, and you get your power meters back, and you get your backlight back because the bulbs are replaceable. Makes sense? So the Zener diodes are completely unnecessary. So I'll explain that here in a second. We'll have a block diagram. But also on the front, we have all our inputs. You'll notice this has a lot more inputs than the RX-R76. So you have, and these have names on, but the names, it's just vanity. You can hook whatever you want up to each input. They're just all line level sources except the phono input. That has a preamplifier stage for a turntable because a turntable will not give you line level, okay? Unless you have your own phono preamp. So basically all these other inputs, you can hook whatever you want, a 2-volt RCA input, line level input on any of these. So your DAC from your computer, like my Topping D90, I can go into any of these inputs except phono. So the names on these doesn't mean anything unless you have, a CD deck, a tape deck, etc. Of course, you want to go ahead and hook them up so you know which one's which, right? But the names on these amplifiers doesn't really mean anything. Okay, you can hook whatever you want as long as it's a standard 2-volt line level RCA input. Makes sense? So TV, VCR. I mean, nobody uses VCRs anymore, but this came out in 1989, so it's going to have names for what was common back then. Makes sense? You have a loudness control, which that just adds like an additional 10 dB boost in certain frequencies. Same thing on the RX-R76. You have your balance control, then you have your volume, and you have see a source, which that just toggles on and off the equalizer. Okay? And then you have see a record, which toggles on and off the equalizer on one of the tape record outputs. So there is the front of the unit. On the back of this unit, you'll notice, like I said, when we were comparing the two, this has a lot more inputs available because this does not have the built-in tuner stage. It basically is just the integrated amplifier stage. So you'll see you have your phono input for your turntable. This, you only want to hook up a turntable because it has that preamp in line. So if you feed this a line level input, you're actually going to be having, you'll be having some distortion because you're driving it past line level. You have CD input, like I said, that can be any standard 2-volt RCA input. Tuner as well. It doesn't have to be a tuner, But you do have to take note, when you get to these two tape stages, one of these is going to be record, one of these is going to be play. The record is an output. So you bring something into this, you can spit it back out to like a tape deck to record. That's what this originally was for. So a lot of people back in the 80s and 90s, they would pop in a blank cassette in their tape deck and like record from the radio or whatever. Makes sense? That's what that was mainly for back in the days. But you have these two record legs right here on tape 1 and tape 2. So you have to be careful because these are outputs. So to use these inputs, you use the one that says play. Makes sense? So just be cautious of that. You have your ground. This is mainly used for the phono stage to prevent any ground loops. So you just tie that into there. You have your CompuLink. Like I said, this is basically a proprietary JVC system to link up additional JVC components, such as the CD player, the tape deck, and it kind of like communicates them all in like unison. To make sense. I don't really have a whole JVC rack to demonstrate that, but that's basically what that was. So say you turn this on, you switch over the CD input, it would then tell the CD player, the CD deck to turn on and maybe begin playing or whatever. It just really depends on how you program it. But that is what the CompuLink is for. The RX-R76 also has CompuLink. You also note you have a record output on the VCR as well. So this has 3 line outputs. Be careful. So when you're hooking this up, make sure you do not plug any of your inputs into the outputs. So where it says REC for record, that is an output level. And then we have play, that is your input. So this actually has 3 outputs. The RX-R76 has 2 outputs, so there's an upgrade there, right? More outputs, more things you can record to. But you notice the big daddy right here, and I don't know how we can see this on camera, but you'll see manufactured by Victor Company of Japan, Maine, Japan. Beautiful. That's what I like to see. Right here, you have two switched outputs. What these are for is these are just regular outlets, like the plug, like the CD deck into, or anything else. I highly recommend you do not plug anything into these. They just cause problems. Just plug your stuff straight into a surge protector or into the wall. Don't use these, okay? That's kind of like an old school thing that they did back in the days. Oh, let's just plug everything into the amplifier. No, don't do that. So here you have your two different sets of outputs. So you have on top, you have the one. So all my speakers are going to be plugged in on the top. So these bottom ones aren't going to be even used. So you just put your speaker wire into there, and then you push that tab down. There's your left, there's your right. Obviously, red's for the hot, black is for the negative. That's how they do it. But there's that and how that works. So there's the back of the unit. Just in case you wanted a close-up of those, all your inputs on the back. Like I said, this was back before the RCA color coding. So to know what is left, you just look on it. See where it says L? So L for left, that will be right here on the right-hand side of the back of this unit. The right is on the left-hand side. Same thing for these other inputs on the other side. So I think I already went over this earlier, the specifications, but we'll just go over it again and compare it to the RX-R76. So for the AX-R97, which the AX, I guess, means they're just integrated amplifier, or the RX means their receiver line. Makes sense? So that's kind of the distinction there, right? So for the AX-R97, 125 watts per channel. That is RMS, which is good. Both channels driven in the 8 ohm load, 20 to 20 kilohertz bandwidth, THD 0.03. And then at a 1 kilohertz tone at 125 watts, RMS, both channels driven into 8 ohms, is 0.004 THD. And the SNR is 103 decibels. SNR for the phono stage, because you have that preamp in there, is 78 decibels. So, and the loudness control, the loudness button adds 5 decibels at 100 hertz. So it's kind of more like a bass boost type of deal going on there. This unit also weighs a little bit more than the RX-R76, but doesn't have the tuner stage in there. So think about that. A little bit more quality going into it, right? So compared to the RX-R76, the AX-R97 has an effective SINAD of 87.82 decibels. If these specs are to be believed, the RX-R76 has a effective SINAD of 79.67 decibels. So we have a little bit of a SINAD boost there, right? And the RX-R76 does 110 watts per channel RMS, both channels driven to 8 ohm load, and its THD is 0.01 at 1 kilohertz tone, and a 91 decibel SNR. And similar weight, this one, AX-R97 is a bit more heavier and without the tuner stage. So there's some specifications, and the reason why I recommend getting an older amp like this, pure analog, no digital bullshit. They're usually built better. They're going to actually give you true power. I believe this is a Class AB amplifier, but even Class A is even better. But my next upgrade from this would be a professional power amp, or the in-game, such as the Benchmark AHB2, which that's basically the best power amplifier money can buy. But I would recommend getting an older decent amp like this. It's going to do you a lot better than getting one of those modern pieces of crap. They break down and they're junk. Oh, and they're also, on a lot of these modern receivers, they don't have the good old analog volume controls, and they're not motorized. What they have is that crappy digital volume. This is not no digital volume control. This right here is pure analog volume control. Excellent. That's what I want. I want an analog potentiometer. So I explained that this has a design flaw with the power lights on the meter panel on the front, where you have two Zener diodes that will basically overheat and cook part of the board and end up damaging the unit, and you'll have to get it repaired, right? So I'm going to overlay a block diagram to show you what's going on here. So you notice all the way over on the left-hand side, you have a voltage regulator, and you'll see that you have a rail called lamp plus B. This is your plus B power supply line that feeds the power meter panel, if that makes sense. This is basically your power source for it. You'll see that that line goes down, and it goes down, and I believe I overlaid this with an orange line, goes down into two Zener diodes, and these are identified by D812 and D815. These right here, these two Zener diodes, D812 and D815, are trouble. Those basically act as like a backup power supply rail in the event the backlights fail. You'll see over towards the right-hand side, you see where it says pilot lamp. Those are the two fuse lamp bulbs that basically are the backlight to this unit. They're just two fuse-type bulbs. They're 12-volt, 150 milliamps. So if one of those bulbs burns out, those two trouble Zener diodes kick on, and they eventually overheat because they're not meant to take all that power that's fed to those power meters. So, and what happens is it ends up also cooking a resistor near that circuit as well. But what you can do is you can clip those two Zener diodes out, just using I just use tiny little micro cutters that I use to cut zip ties with. Just take those in there, cut those two Zener diodes out, throw them in the trash, basically. You don't need them. They're not necessary for the functionality of this amplifier. All they do is act up as a backup power supply for that power meter. So the power meter will still work as long as the backlight bulbs are good. And these backlight bulbs are replaceable. So if they burn out, you just get yourself two fuse bulbs. And I'll show you those fuse bulbs here in a second. So you can get these over on Parts Express. I don't know how well you can see it on camera, but these are what fuse bulbs look like. They literally look like a fuse, and these are bulbs, and these just pop in. So I haven't powered this unit on yet because I just got this unit off of eBay. Hopefully it works, right? But if the backlight is burnt out, well, we'll get to demonstrate putting these in. But they just pop right in. It takes two 12-volt, 150 milliamp rated fuse bulbs. You can get them at Parts Express, and they're very inexpensive. I think they're like a $1.50 or whatever a bulb, so very inexpensive. So you'll see you also have an additional rail. I believe I put this in green that gets fed as well, so that doesn't go through those Zener diodes. So if you cut those two Zener diodes out of the circuit, the IC 401, the LED driver, which is the sharp power meter IC, will still be able to get power as long as that pilot lamp has bulbs that are working, right? So those two Zener diodes, 812 and D815, you can cut those out. Be careful because you're going to see three other Zener diodes, and those are necessary. You cut those out, your power meters will, they'll never work. So that's required. You want to have that. But so D831, D832, and D833, you want to keep those. So only cut out D812 and D815. Here is a little disclaimer. I'm not responsible for any damage occurred to your device or monetary loss or anything else. Do this at your own risk. Like I said, this is just an educational video. So I take no responsibility. If you feel uncomfortable with doing it, don't do it. Have a electronics repair person do it for you. And I actually know a good electronics repair person out in Canada. His name's 12-Volt Vids on YouTube. Look him out. But D812 and D815. Now, these are the identical Zener diodes that are in the RX-R76 and RX-R75. So on those units, you would cut out the same exact Zener diodes. So we're going to go ahead and pop the hood on this and show you the internals of this unit and show you that trouble spot and how to fix it. So I'm just using my my Pickwick here. You'll just need a Phillips screwdriver. So you'll undo these 2 screws on the side panel here, and there's going to be 2 screws on the other side, and there's going to be 2 screws on the top back. You want to keep these screws somewhere safe so you don't lose them, right? Okay, so I'm not sure how well you guys can see, but we have the top off, the cover of this unit, and we can now see the inside of this unit. So you see this has 2 nice big filter caps. What I noticed compared to the RX-R76 is this uses Elna caps, whereas the RX-R76 uses Nichicon caps, and I actually prefer Nichicon, so that might be a slight downgrade, right? But that's no big deal. I can have this recapped with Nichicon caps down the road if I don't like the sound signature. But as long as the Elna caps are just in the power supply stage, they won't make a difference to the actual audio quality. Where it matters is more in the audio signal. So if you have some of these Elna caps in the audio path, then there might be a slight change in the audio, the sound signature of the audio. And caps can make a slight difference in the sound signature. So if you have Elna caps or if you have Nichicon, I kind of prefer Nichicon caps myself. But I do notice this one uses Elna. So the treble area in question is right here. And I took some high quality pictures earlier before I did this, so you guys can see better. I'll see if I can get the camera in there better. But this is where the treble area is. And you'll notice you have like 5 Zener diodes there. They're kind of like on these standoffs right here, these ceramic standoffs. And they did that just for heat dissipation. And the ceramic standoffs are there to prevent them from shorting each other out, kind of like a insulator. But you'll notice the 2 ones at the end are very small. Those are the D812 and D815. So those 2 ones that look smaller are the actual ones that will be clipped out. But we'll go ahead and we'll see if I can adjust the camera and get you guys some better angles. So hopefully that angle is a little bit better so you can see it a little bit better. So you notice right here we got a whole row of them. D812 and D815 are the Zeners that clip out. And for this, I'll just be using this little micro cutter. And to be able to pick them out if I can't reach them, you'll use pliers. So that's all you're going to need. So let's go ahead and see if I can get in there and do the fix. Now, let me note, this fix only works beforehand. It's a preventative measure. So if those Zener diodes have already failed and burnt up the board and shorted some resistors out, then your damage is basically already done. It can still be repaired, but this fix is beforehand. So this is like a preventative measure. So if you get one of these units, whether it's the AX-R97, RX-R76, or RX-R75, or one of these similar units, the process is the same. They basically, all of them that have these power meters basically have a similar circuit. So it's D812 and D815. I'll reiterate again. You'll see these will be labeled. They'll be right next to one another. And it's going to be these ones that are smaller looking. Okay? Like I said, I take no responsibility for any damage incurred. This is just for educational purposes. Proceed at your own risk. When you clip these out, you want to be careful that you're not leaving any metal pieces behind that will just float in there and cause a short circuit. So that's why I'm making sure of. Make sure I can get a good grip on these, but also to where I take those pliers and when I cut it, it doesn't just fall and fall in the unit or whatever. I have a hold of it so I can just pull the metal piece out, if that makes sense. There we go. I'm not sure how well you can saw that on camera because, I probably was blocking the view. But I don't know how well you can see, but D812 and D815 have been clipped out, and there's no remaining little pieces of wire or anything in there. So that's all it took, was just clipping those out. You got to be a little bit patient and have a hold on it so it doesn't just fall. Now, these ceramic insulators, if those fall in the unit, they're not conductive, but still you don't want something rattling around there, so you just want to get a grip of those and get those out of there. But another preventive measure is you'll see all these copper-headed Phillips screws. These are all grounding screws, so you want to take that a Phillips screwdriver and just tighten them all down. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as well. Just tighten all these grounds. But I also noticed the trouble area. I don't know if it's on the camera view or not. Where I could see that this was starting to get a little bit hot here, but I see another area that was starting to get hot. Yeah, and I've already dusted this unit out as well, so I'll go ahead and change the camera view and tighten all the ground screws. So all the ground screws on this unit seem to have been pretty relatively tight, so that's good. No cause of concern on this unit. There was a couple that were slightly loose, but yeah, it's just good preventative measure to go over all these copper-headed Phillips screws. You'll know they're definitely ground screws because they'll have this little like metal piece. I don't know if that's on camera or not, but you'll see what I mean. It's a good preventive measure to go over it and make sure those are tight. So we'll put the cover back on this unit, and I'll show you the Zener diodes, and then we'll fire it up. And before I put the cover on, we'll fire it up and make sure the power meter lights up. And if it doesn't, we'll replace the fuse bulbs. I'll show you where that's at. So I don't know how well you can see it on camera, but the fuse bulbs are right in this panel. You have these two like little metal clips at the top. You bend those up, and then the circuit board just pops down, and you have your two slots for your two 12 volt 150 milliamp fuse bulbs. So the backlight burns out, that's what you do. So I'm going to go ahead and readjust the camera angle, and we'll turn the unit on. I'll have the volume control all the way on 0. It's not really a good idea to run an amplifier without a load on it, meaning speakers connected, but it's okay because we're not going to be turning up the volume or cranking it or anything like that. I just want to see if the power meters are okay and if we do get a speaker relay engaged. Now the $1,000,000 question is, does it turn on? Now I noticed the power cable on this unit, the end of the power cord, I don't know if you can see on camera, is slightly bent, so I'm going to have to take a pair of pliers and try to straighten that up, and I'll plug the unit in, and hopefully we don't have any magic smoke, right? I'll also take a flashlight and just look over the board really quick again, make sure there's no pieces or anything missing, you know, that'll short the board out, and then I'll plug it in. So the unit has been plugged in. I don't know if you guys can see on camera, but we do have the power standby light on. It's just a tiny little red square. You probably saw that, right? So now I'm going to turn the unit on, and let's hope the power meters come on. If not, it's most likely going to be the backlight. One of the backlight bulbs is blowing, and I'll get to demonstrate it. So for the video, we kind of hope that the backlights burn out, right? But we'll see. But we'll go ahead and turn it on. Like I said, I turned the volume all the way down. I'm going to just check the board over again really quick. Yeah, board looks okay. So we'll go ahead and turn it on, and we should hear initial click of the standby relay engage, and then the speaker protect relay should engage. So I don't know if you heard that second clip, but the initial standby click turned on, and then the speaker protect relay clicked on. And as you can see, the backlight is not lit up. So, well, guess we'll have to change the backlight bulbs out, right? But, ooh, this one's a pretty one. So you see we're on tape 2 monitor. I'm just going to switch this over. We got our analog switching. SCA records on, SCA source is on. Those just light up a nice little orange. That's kind of nice. But so looks like we are going to have to change the backlight bulbs. So I'll go ahead and turn it off, and you should hear the relays disengage. So there's that. So I'm going to unplug the power again, and then I'll demonstrate how you change those fuse bulbs. Okay, so on the back of the power meter panel, you'll have this little individual circuit board. This houses the 2 fuse lamp backlight bulbs. So you're going to see 4 tabs. You just undo the top 2 tabs. You just lift them up. You might need to get a pair of needle nose pliers if they're bent down really flush, so let me go ahead and do that. I did unplug the power as well, so the power's been disengaged, but you're right next to these big juicy caps, so just be careful. But you just bend these tabs up, this will lift down, and you replace the bulbs. Sometimes a flathead screwdriver will help too. You want to be careful not to break the tabs off. So there they are, and surely enough, one of the bulbs is burnt. So we'll go ahead and replace both of these. You gotta be careful because this is tied in. This is zip tied to that wire, so you don't want to pull any wires off. There we go. Fuse balls have been changed out. And yeah, one of them was indeed burned. I'll show you all the parts that we pulled out of this here in a bit. So we'll go ahead and turn it back around, plug it back in, and see if she lights up. Okay, the moment of truth. Let's go ahead and turn the unit back on. You can see we have our standby light turned back on. Fuse bulbs have been replaced, so the backlight should light up when we turn the unit on. So let's hope all is well. So that final click, that was the speaker protect relay engaging. That's good. And as you can see, the backlight lights up. We're good. Like I said, power meters, I won't be able to test that until I put a load on it. Hook up speakers, that'll be upstairs in my room. Probably won't be on video, but it will work. And like I said, don't have a load on this, so have it all the way down. Not ideal to run an amplifier without a load, so this won't be for too long. But she turns on, everything kicks on. I'll go ahead and put the top cover back on it, and I think we will pretty much wrap up this video. Okay, so I have the cover back on this unit. This unit's ready to go into service. Hopefully, the final question is, will it work? Well, I'll have to hook it up to the speakers upstairs and everything, and we'll see if the power meters are working, but they should be. So here's the top cover. I did mention this before. Another flaw was the top of this is so open. As you can see, this is just all vents. So it's easy for stuff to be able to get into this unit because, you know, your whole amplifier circuit board is just right there, you know. So you got to be careful with anything. Like if you're going to spray Lysol in your room or use a fogger or any type of thing. And also when you clean this, use a dry cloth. But yeah, so ask me how I know about these units, because you can end up shorting something out on the board, and I may have done that to my RX-R76 one or two times. But yeah, this unit definitely I might get something to set on top of it. You don't want to cover the vents, so you don't want, you know, you want to set something that, like another deck or whatever, that's going to have legs that's going to lift up and let this thing breathe still. But yeah, you definitely don't want to, if you just leave this open like that, just be careful, okay? Because you spray Lysol in your room or anything like that, the mist can get into this and short something out, and it won't be a pretty day. So I'll be taking a little bit better care of this one. The top does have a couple scratches and stuff. I tried to clean up as best I could. I don't know how well it shows up on camera. Hopefully it doesn't show up very well on camera, right? But yeah, this unit's ready to go back in service. I'm also going to show you guys the parts that came out of the unit. So here's the parts we took out. We took out two Zener diodes, D812 and D815. They're not in full because I might have clipped one of the legs, you know, but there it is. Just those little things right there. We have our, these are the ceramics right there. Like I said, those aren't conductive, but you don't just want to leave them just rolling around in the unit. Then we have our fuse bulbs. This one, I don't know how well it's going to show up on camera. This one is blown. So it's, yeah, it's fully gone. You can see the wire. You can tell if one of these bulbs is bad because obviously it's similar to a fuse, right? If the wire going across, if it's busted, you know, broken, obviously the fuse bulb is bad. Another thing is if this is all like brown looking or whatever, like it looks like it's been blown, then obviously it's bad. This other fuse bulb, however, still, nope, this other one's gone too. So both of these fuse bulbs have blown up. But yeah, another thing with this unit, try not to power off and on a lot. I used to be in the habit of every day, wake up, turn the unit on, because this is what I mainly use for my computer, right? The audio for my computer. So I wake up, turn on, and at the end of the day, turn it off. You know, turn on, turn off, turn on, turn off. If you do that every day, that does put a little bit more wear and tear, especially on the relays. But also these fuse bulbs. These fuse bulbs don't really like being turned off and on all the time. And sometimes when you initially turn that on, you get like an inrush current. So you're more likely to have these blow if you keep turning it off and on. So it's best to just keep the unit on 24/7, like I do. And these fuse bulbs, they'll last several years. The ones on my RX-R76 still work, and they've been in there at least 3 or 4 years. So these fuse bulbs should last a good, 4 to 5 years if you keep the unit on 24/7. So that's another tip. Just keep the unit on 24/7. Like I said, since we took those Zeners out, if one of these bulbs fail, just one of them, the whole panel will go out. And all you gotta do is just replace the bulbs, okay? They're very inexpensive. You can get them at Parts Express. They're right in here in Ohio. I'm in Ohio, so I basically get the parts next day. But yeah, you can still buy them. They're 12 volt, 150 milliamps. That's MA. Makes sense? And they're called fuse lamps. But yeah, they're very common. You just pop them in, and you're good to go. But that's the little fix for this. Since I've cut these out, when the bulbs do fail, I'm not going to have any catastrophic damage. I basically have protected this unit. There's more preventive maintenance you can do on these. Obviously, tighten the ground screws was one of them I showed. But another thing is a lot of these units of this age, especially on the RX-R76 and RX-R75, they use Sony Bond, which is that like conductive yellow glue. Sorry, I can't speak. That conductive yellow glue that will eventually turn brown and turn corrosive and conductive and can cause damage. You usually see that at the wire interconnects from the different boards and stuff. I didn't really inspect this board. I didn't see any on this board, but I'll look it over again. And you just want to get that off. But that I usually let my my technician work on that, my electronics repair guy, do the preventive maintenance. Resolder some of the interconnects at the boards and everything you can do on these units for preventive maintenance, especially the Zener diodes and stuff like that. Those tend to get crispy and hot, and the solder can start to, get a little weak in those areas. But yeah, with these older units, as far as recapping them, you don't necessarily have to recap them. Dave over at 12 Volt Vids, he says it's not really necessary. You'd be surprised how long the caps will work, especially depending on what circuit they're in. Usually power supply circuit caps are usually more likely to go than audio circuit caps. But this unit probably does not need a recap. My other unit did not need a recap. But I did see Elna caps in this one compared to my RX-R76 that use Nichicon caps. So that might be some down the road is to get it recapped and have some preventive maintenance done to it. But that I won't be doing because that's out of my comfort zone. Any soldering and stuff like that, I just send it out to 12 Volt Vids. He's out in he's out by Vancouver in Canada. He's a Canadian. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap up this video. I might add in it upstairs and turned on and see if it works. But, yeah. Okay, so we're upstairs. The stereo is all set up. It's all connected and everything, the speakers and everything. And nothing fancy, just some Techniques SB ST450s and some RCA mid-range drivers. But we're going to go ahead and play some music and just see if it works. So, as you can see, it does work, and the power meters do work as intended. So, I can't give any sound impressions or anything yet. Well, if I prefer its sound over the RX-R76, I will say this. On all these units here, they do sound a little bit warm, a little bit too warm, a little bit too dull. So I always like to bring up the high end a few decibels. So on this one, we have 6.3 and 16K. I bring that up about 4 dB. I still have to play with it. You don't really want to mess around with the EQ until the unit's been warmed up. So usually power it on, let the thing sit for 30 minutes to an hour or so to warm up, and then start engaging the EQ by pressing the SCA source button to turn it on, and then play with the EQ. I'd say add about a few dB on the high-end frequencies to really bring that mid-range and that high-end back. I had to do it on the JVC RX-R76 as well, bring up a little bit of the high-end, and it sounded pretty damn good. But yeah, this plus I don't know the burn-in on this unit compared to my RX-R76. My RX-R76 had years and years and years of burn-in, which that's obviously going to affect the sound too. And it also had an overhaul, and you got a lot of things resoldered in it and stuff like that, some maintenance done on it. But yeah, I might do a review video later on, probably a year or two after I've really gotten used to the sound of this unit and tweaked with it, and it's got some burn-in on it and stuff like that, and I'll give my impressions. But hey, it works. I checked everything on it. It's all working. The EQ's working. It's disengaging and engaging. Loudness control, the balance, everything checks out. Parameters are working, so that is good. Last thing we'll do is we'll check the additional sources. So I'm going to hook up my FiO X5 III, and we'll see if that works as well. So we'll switch the source over to CD, which is the source I used for it. And I'm going to go ahead and play something. I have a FiO X5 III. I don't know if you guys can see it on the video or not. Probably not. Does it work? I would say that's a yes. So if you guys didn't believe that I had a FiO X5 III hooked up, there it is on the floor. You can see it is hooked up to the CD input, and it works. So our different sources work. So I'm going to go ahead and listen to some music. And initially I'll give a review, maybe in a couple years. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching.